Overtourism has been becoming more and more of a problem in Barcelona. So much so that now the locals have started protesting against tourism. So let's find out more about what exactly is the situation.
Why do locals hate tourists? We've seen people in Barcelona spraying visitors with water guns and anti-tourism protests in Mexico that turned violent.
First of all, I understand like protesting something and wanting something to change, but in my perspective, like ruining things is never really the right way to go about this because, well, it seems like maybe this is more of a chain store or something, but just ruining property never really seems like, yeah, the best solution. I get wanting to protest, but maybe in another way.
Similar ideas have been picking up in other European cities too, but tourism contributes a lot to economies around the world, and some countries are desperate for more visitors. So what's going on, and why is this backlash growing? It's not surprising Barcelona had major protests. 15 million people visited the city last year. That number is almost 10 times its population.
Yeah, that's wild. That's a wild, crazy number. 15 million people. Let's see. Let's see what else she has to say.
And they were greeted by this: tourists go home. It's not just crowded streets that bothers locals. More tourists means more demand for short-term rentals. Online short-term letting companies like Airbnb have taken over the market too, with people able to charge whatever they want without any regulation. And the housing that is left gets pricey.
Yeah. Now that's a real thing that happens. That's when you have an overtourism problem. So that means the place can no longer sustainably manage tourism. You'll start to see the prices going up, and that makes the housing for locals unaffordable, as well as the prices of just the general cost of living, like groceries. These are real issues that need to be managed preferably before it gets to this stage. And I do understand that this is the news, so as with any news channel, they might kind of make this bigger than it seems. So it might not be that like every tourist who goes here is experiencing this and this is on a daily basis or anything like that. But it does give an indication to what is happening and that there needs to be something, something has to be done to help this issue, because it is an issue if it's negatively impacting the locals. And also, in turn, the tourists who might go there. Let's just watch before I just make this a whole long video already before we've even watched 1 minute.
The cost of an average rental in Barcelona has doubled over the last decade. The average monthly rent there costs €1,500, and the average monthly income is also €1,500.
I know I'm pausing it already, but when I was in Valencia for my internship, because I did tourism management in college, and I went to Valencia to do my internship there, and I spoke to the people at the company, for example. They were also telling me that the cost of the rent there was like high, like relatively speaking, so high in comparison to their income that it's just really difficult to be able to afford it. And so even in places like Valencia, you already kind of see it, but not to this like extreme yet. But that's why I'm a really big proponent of managing situations before things get this far.
So it's just not feasible. And having that many extra people puts a huge strain on local resources too. Simon went to Mallorca recently to see the impact.
So many people means so much more traffic on the road. It means problems with water. It means problems with power. It means problems with waste.
What do you mean by the water and power?
We go on holiday. We might want a shower in the morning. We want a shower in the evening. We want to drink water. So we want to use the toilet. Spain is a hot country. It regularly goes through droughts. So yes, there's pressures on the water table. We're buying things from the shop. That creates waste.
And then there's just the vibe of a place. If most of the houses near yours turn into an Airbnb, the area loses a sense of community. Local amenities turn into gift shops and local workers into tour guides.
Yeah, that's the whole aspect of like gentrification as well, is where you'll see the locals being replaced or being like chased out of their homes to make place for tourism development and hotels, for example, Airbnbs, shops, those kinds of things. So there are things that can be done, but let's keep watching first.
It is important to say, though, there are lots of people in Spain and other countries who still really want to welcome tourists.
And that is a message that Spain's ambassador to the UK also wanted to reinforce, that the protests are a small minority. They do not represent the voice of the Spanish people.
And in many
It's like I was saying.
places, this hate for tourists just doesn't exist. Countries like Greenland, Morocco and Georgia are all crying out for more visitors. And despite France being the most visited country in the world and a country famously not afraid to protest, it just hasn't seen the same backlash.
France is a much bigger country and it's got a much wider spread of its pretty towns, its pretty cities. It's only really got the south coast of France, whereas Spain has got really tight core destinations that are literally having a surge of visitors flood in.
Many countries
Yeah, that's also another thing that could really help with like over tourism, is trying to disperse the tourists into other regions of the country. So you see here with the what they were saying, that there's only a few key places in Spain right now that most tourists go to. So it could help if other places, if they put the spotlight on those more and maybe marketed those more, so that the tourism in other places will get displaced, or how do you say it, moved to other cities.
in Southeast Asia believe the more tourists, the merrier. In Thailand, the level of visitors peaked just before COVID, and people there are working hard to get that back. Over tourism isn't even a debate.
The real debate is how the hell do we get them back? We need the money back. Vietnam, frankly, you'd be hard pushed to find a single Vietnamese who would put sustainability of tourism anywhere on their top 30 or 40 list of things to be worried about.
Sometimes it's even to the detriment of their own environment. Maya Bay in Thailand had so many people going up and down in boats that the coral got completely destroyed. But it was a rare occasion where officials chose to protect the land over making profit. They shut down the island completely for 3 years to let it recover.
Yeah, I actually, interestingly, did a presentation about Maya Bay in my college years as well. And yeah, so it is true that the coral, it was such a disruption to the nature that they had to close the place. But that's actually a really good thing to do sometimes, to let things get back to their normal states, or at least try to get it somewhat to what it was before.
So back to the backlash. Why is this an issue?
But I was going to say also that even when you reopen the place, you still need to have, like, regulate tourism so that it doesn't just go back to the way it was before.
Now, what's behind this sudden tourist hate in areas which have welcomed them for decades? Well, firstly, more people can afford to travel now, and the COVID-19 pandemic meant that some people were just
I'm sorry if you heard that. The fridge is going crazy.
desperate to get away as soon as they could. But For others, the pandemic had a different impact.
For the first time, Spanish people saw their homes without tourists. They saw their beaches without tourists. They could go to local cafes and bars without being covered in tourists. And they started to react to the fact that, does this have to be like this all the time? Do we have to cope with this level of tourism?
So we really missed them and they didn't miss us at all.
No comment.
While most things are getting more expensive, flights are actually getting cheaper with budget airlines like EasyJet, Ryanair and Jet2. And then there's social media, which means tourists are concentrated in certain areas, all to get the same photo for their Insta dump. Like this iconic site in Japan where Mount Fuji is peeking out from behind a shop.
Well, if I didn't have social media, I wouldn't come here. I wouldn't even know that it existed, this place.
So many people.
But so the interesting thing is that this can also be used positively or more positively if you start to market places that maybe are not as known yet but are just as beautiful to attract people like her who want to take a picture and have them take a picture of something beautiful there, so that again the tourism is just more spread out across the country instead of centralized in these areas where it will create these problems because of overcrowding and overtourism.
Crowd in the area, getting in the way of traffic and causing blockages to take the same photo that officials actually put up a screen to block the view. But Jonathan...
That's crazy. I did not know of that. And they were blocking the view. That's... Wow. Actually, this reminds me of like Amsterdam. I'm from the Netherlands and we had or still kind of have a overtourism problem as well. And they started to... We had like a sign of Amsterdam in letters. And people wanted to take pictures with that. And it got so crowded that the sign had to be like removed, or I forgot exactly what they did, but I think they removed it, or maybe they put it somewhere else, or but I think they just removed it so that the place wasn't as crowded.
Jonathan says this herd mentality when we're travelling isn't new, it's just speeding up.
We used to complain about the same bloody thing. Everyone went to the same place. Certain places come into fashion. Everyone has to go there. It gets ruined because everyone's there. Then somebody discovers something else. And it just happens much faster now.
So what can be done about it then?
Yeah, that's actually... it's like the tourism destination life cycle. There's a model for that. And maybe I can put it on the screen somewhere here as well. But that's the basic kind of model to show how a tourism destination develops. As in, it gets like, there's exploration, things get like more developed, people start coming over, more and more people start coming, and at the end it could like stagnate or it could pick up again. But that's the natural cycle kind of that a place probably will experience, is that it starts attracting or gaining attraction. People start coming over, more and more people start coming. Then there might be a decline because there's just too many people and they go somewhere else. And then it's up to the place what they do with that, if it picks back up or if it just dies down completely.
Venice brought in this €5 tourist tax for day trippers at the busiest times of the year, which it says has been a success. It's now increased the number of days that tax applies. Barcelona announced a total ban on all short-term holiday lets by 2029. And when Simon spoke to the Spanish ambassador, he said they're planning to build more homes for Spanish locals. But it is a fine balance. Governments need to keep their residents happy without losing the income they get from tourism. So how can we be better tourists? If you still want to travel, this shouldn't put you off, but there are some ways to be less annoying.
This is a very difficult question, and I asked this to an MP in Mallorca last week. And we need to consider ourselves as tourists and the demands that we're putting on resources where we're going. So Do we need to have 2 showers? What about the waste that you're creating? Do you really need to hire a car? Can you use local transport? Could you potentially have a longer holiday in the place where you live? Those like short trips present acute pressure on destinations. They are the points that the MP in Mallorca said we need to be thinking of. Because in his words and his words himself, he said sometimes we're starting to feel like strangers in our own home here.
The root cause of the affordable housing crisis in Spain is a lack of supply to meet demand, said by Airbnb spokesperson. Regulating Airbnb does not alleviate housing concerns. It only hurts local families who rely on hosting to afford their homes and rising costs. Now, while that is somewhat true, I do think it matters on the way you implement things like what they're doing. So they're banning the short-term rental apartments from like 2028 on or something like that, or 2029. So yes, that could increase the poverty and unemployment rates, but if they have certain measures in place that prevent that, that does not need to happen. So it's all about how you go about it. So you could incentivize those landlords who are usually renting to short-term tourists to rent to or make them long-term for locals by maybe you could give a tax break or incentivize them in that way to have a long-term rental, and that way they don't have to lose their income either, and the locals get more places to stay. So that could be a way that you can avoid that happening. And as far as the protests themselves, it's my understanding that they're not protesting to get rid of tourism completely, but to get it down to a more manageable number. So I think that's a good standpoint to take, is to try not to just scare people off, because that is something that might happen if people see this on the news, even though it might not, it's like a small minority who is protesting. If it gets blown up like this in the news, possible tourists or people who are planning their trip might get put off with that or scared off because they're thinking it's going to be like that. And even if they're not thinking that, maybe they think that they're unwanted, which could be a possible problem if they're not visiting Barcelona because they think they're unwanted. So I think that it's definitely something that the government needs to take into consideration, or it's something that they have to regulate and prevent the reputation of Barcelona to get damaged, because you don't want to get rid of tourism completely, because it's my understanding that it does make up a good portion of the GDP. And I think I would implement the ban of Airbnbs or short-term rentals slower, so that you gradually each year kind of reduce them, so that you give more time to give them a plan to come up with. Now 2028 is a few years away, so maybe they're doing that, but I don't know if that would be enough time or what they're gonna do after the ban is in place, because I think it's a good thing to try to help steer the landlords in the right direction, to, for example, incentivize them to rent to locals. And another thing that they could possibly do is implement a tourist tax, so that they could use that money to reinvest in the local economy. That way, the tourism will benefit the locals more, and the tourists who come there who might have a better experience even because it's less crowded and they don't feel as unwanted as they do now. So yeah, those are just some ways that I think might help Barcelona. And I was wondering what you think. What do you think that they should do? And if you put yourself in a place of a tourist, would you still visit Barcelona if they implemented a tax for tourists? I was really curious about that. So let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in a next video.